We're going to launch the project today by Professor Vida Mijelo, who's here with us today. And then we're going to have two short contributions, hopefully from Dr. Catherine O'Mahony and certainly from Professor Helen Phelan. And after that, we'll introduce and demonstrate the resources, and there'll be time for questions at the end, or questionings. All right, so I'll just start by telling you a little bit about the project overall, because today marks not just the launch of our online Artistic Doctorate Resources, but also the close of this project, which is and was a 12-month project. It was funded by the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education here in Ireland. And it was a project that was very much inspired by Artistic Doctorates in Europe, which was a project that was led by Professor Vida Mijelo, and which I went to the closing symposium of in Helsinki in the summer of 2019, back when we did such things. So we were, I arrived at the tail end of this project, but I was so enchanted by the cross-European process of examining artistic research doctorates in dance and movement, and the way that that kind of allowed a whole range of pedagogies and thinking about pedagogies to happen, that on the way home from that visit to Helsinki on 2 planes and in 2 airports, I wrote the application for Visioning the Future, because feeling very strongly that Ireland had some history in artistic research doctorates, but absolutely didn't have an integrated discussion about it. We wanted very much to connect to discourse and research projects that had happened previously, but also to develop our own and to develop some kind of beginning of discourse and discussion. So COVID-19 happened almost immediately after we started the project. And so we shifted online, and we decided immediately to run, instead of the projects that we had anticipated doing, conferences and workshops and so forth, we decided to do this online seminar series. And hopefully many of you here today took part in those or were part of them, and they're all archived on our website. But they were quite a comprehensive range of seminars over quite a short period of time. So we had 15 seminars over 3 months, and they were in 4 parts. The first part was very much the European context, and we had some really extraordinary visitors from that context: Paolo de Assis, Annette Arlander, Andrea Breit, Gretchen Schiller, Vida Mijelo, who's here today. And then we looked at current practices in Ireland, and we had contributions from the Irish Research Council, from IMBAS, the Irish Forum for Artistic Research, as well as staff here from the University College Cork in Ireland, from our School of Film, Music and Theatre. We had great contributions from our heads of department there. We also then included student perspectives, a really important part of what we were doing. And then lastly, we looked at where would we go from now. So I really feel that that seminar series was a very positive experience. We learned so much. It was such a steep way of imagining how we would do what we had hoped to do. But the plan of having a 1-hour short seminar regularly, once or twice a week over a number of months, really seemed to work. And it meant that people could both contribute to those seminars and also take part in them without a big commitment of time when we're also zoomed out. I also feel like it really shifted the national debate around artistic research in Ireland, and it started the process of beginning to develop a community for doctoral education, especially those which include practice, and especially those in the performing arts and in film and screen media. So we conducted research into regulations related to Irish higher education and artistic doctorates, and we conducted a series of interviews. So with those 3 things, the interviews looking at the regulations and the seminar series, all of those fed into the open educational resources that we are launching today. These are open, which means that you can have them and you can adapt them as long as you credit us. And they are there very much in the spirit of generosity and democracy, and that we want the support for artistic doctorates internationally to flourish and thrive. And we hope very much in Ireland, but obviously these are available to anybody. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Vida Migelo. Vida is a great ally and friend of this research project, and we really appreciate her doing this for us today. She is a dance artist and a professor of dance and choreographic practices at Middlesex University, and director, as I mentioned earlier, of the Erasmus Plus project, Artistic Doctorates in Europe, third cycle provision in dance and performance. She was also editor of the Oxford Handbook of Improvisation in Dance in 2019. Vida, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Jules, and huge congratulations on your running of this project. I must say, through those seminars, you said the holding of those seminars in that sort of those almost weekly, I think sometimes they were bi-weekly as well, weren't they, was actually quite a little lifeline during the earlier parts of COVID, and to see this project come to fruition through what has been a very challenging year is really wonderful to see, and a real testament to you and your teams, both tenacity, insight, vision. So I think it's really fantastic to be here with you at this launch of these resources, at the sort of culmination of all that work. I've written a few words because I didn't have long to speak and I didn't want to waffle on. So I'm just going to pick up a few of those words for you. So this work has been, as I say, a real great pleasure to me, and it's been wonderful to be a regular participant in the project. It's taken forward an area that's of great interest to me personally, as both a researcher in the area of research pedagogy and being myself an artistic researcher. But it also reflects the very everyday concerns and challenges that we face, and I face as a supervisor and as a leader of doctoral studies in my own university. It seems to me that this work is part of a sea change in the field of artistic research degrees. As whilst these degrees are now prevalent in many parts of the world, although we can see them at very different stages of development, this prevalence doesn't necessarily reflect how they sit within regulatory and institutional frameworks. And indeed, there's been very little study of what the real experiences are of artistic research students undertaking these degrees. So in the early days of practice research, if we think back to those that remember it, the PARIP project, Practice as Research in Performance, that was an AHRC funded project back in, I'm going to get my dates wrong, somebody correct me, early 2000s, late 1990s? I'm terrible with dates, especially at the moment. The year seems to have gone into a blur. But Robin Nelson at that point produced some very provisional guidance that already was indicating we knew we needed frameworks. We knew we needed something more than what institutions already had in place for a more, what we might call a more traditional doctoral study. And despite then that having that early indication there from Robin, and also the huge flurry of text that we've produced on the ontologies and discourses and methodologies of practice research and artistic research, there's still been little work done on what this really means for the experience of doctoral candidates and how this relates to process of supervision and the systems, resources and regulations that frame that work within a university context. So I was really pleased to sit last night playing with these resources, as you'll see, popping between bubbles, which will make sense shortly. And seeing that they were both very real, very grounded, but also playful, but also located in the real structure of the doing, institutional structures that we're working with, and the way they interface across the real doings and the nature of artistic research as a hands-on, real lived experience alongside those kind of institutional, organizational, more standard processes. And I really enjoyed that interface. And hopefully that as people see them today, you'll both see that the links to the work of the Artistic Doctorates in Europe project that, as Jill said, I ran, and this work really take us forward in the field. So it's with projects like this one then we can start to see a fuller picture of what it really means to support and undertake an artistic doctorate. So what we see here are resources that are for candidates, supervisors and institutions, enabling them to reflect and, importantly, I think, take actions. And quite a few of them have this notion of action built into them, of what does it mean to take up the action that these guidance and these resources offer us. I think it's also important, and perhaps a testament to the work of artistic researchers and those of us supporting them, that they are from the ground up. These are sort of coming from the thinking of artistic researchers, the thinking and experience of candidates and of supervisors. And what does that tell us that we need to be taking forward to support this work into the future? So for me, these resources are not only important to what is admittedly for us a pretty small, pretty niche field when it comes down to it. Our artistic doctorate is a pretty niche group of people doing this work. But I think the work also has resonance beyond us within that niche field and the particularities of the artistic doctorate. I would hope that the insights and strategies that are being proposed here, that are come out of the artistic doctorate, have the potential to inform and influence a wide range of researchers and move beyond into other disciplines. These are modes of good practice for everybody, not just artist researchers. So for me, this influence that goes beyond the arts is centered around the use and application of non-normative epistemologies, of really valuing material and embodied knowings. And it's from those that we might develop then our kind of inter or transdisciplinary research spaces and challenge methods and forms of research that allow wider cross-fertilization and wider change of what does it mean to be a doctoral candidate? What does a doctorate even mean? So there's kind of broader implications for the resources that are here. And I really do hope they're taken up further. So perhaps most important, though, is that this project makes a difference to the candidates themselves. And it's their potential and their legacy that the work supports. So it's our candidates that will become the leaders of the future. It's through pursuing these hybrid creative inquiries that combine doing and reflexive being that are enabled through these resources. So through the unpacking of assumptions, the developing of rigorous, often pretty non-linear, and that's really clear in the resources for students, trusting those kind of not yet knowing places and how can we be in those spaces productively. It's embracing these ways of knowing that actually superbly positions our candidates to become the cultural change makers of the future. And that seems so important right now. I mean, if it was always important, but right now that seems we really need candidates to be coming through our programs and making a difference in the world. So from these capacities to work creatively, they can address and hopefully, what does it mean to be a human being in the world right now? What solutions can we come to for more sustainable relatedness, to promote more plural and inclusive societies? And it seems to me that the artistic doctorate, the ways of being that it promotes, ideally position our candidates to be those leaders in the future. So these resources, and indeed the project as a whole, has been a really important primer for taking that work forward. And the work, as you'll see, is really beautifully presented and documented, allowing us to kind of enter these spaces and play in these creative ways in a way that reflects the artistic practice itself, perhaps. And so finally, really just to congratulate you, Jules, and your team, that you've to develop the work and to take it forward. And I certainly will be sharing it with my colleagues and my students. Hopefully all of you online will too. It's really useful research to see how this work will both mature and enrich the provisions we offer. And I really look forward to seeing and taking up what we might do with this in the future. So a call to everybody to share it, link to it, use it, use this work. I think it will make a real difference to both our supervisory practices and to the candidates that are undertaking these degrees. And so I congratulate you, and it's a real pleasure to be with you with this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vida. It's such a joy to hear you speak about the work, and it's so exciting because we've had our nose to the grindstone trying to make it. So the idea that, oh yes, it could actually go out into the world is, yes, of course, that's why we're here. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Dr. Catherine O'Mahony is here, I believe, and she is from our Centre for the Integration of Teaching and Learning here at University College Cork. And she's going to just speak for a few minutes on the national context in Ireland for the funding and the focus on teaching and learning. Is that okay, Catherine? Excuse me.
So good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to join you for this launch of Visioning the Future, where my esteemed colleagues are sharing this important resource in support of the Artistic Doctorate. These resources provide concrete supports for all of those involved in the doctorate in artistic practice, the PhD student, the supervisor, the examiner, and indeed the institution. This work, as Jules mentioned, was funded through the 2019 Strategic Alignment of Teaching and Learning Enhancement Funding, a bit of a mouthful, which is a joint initiative of our National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning and our Irish University Association. So through this scheme, UCC received close to $500,000 in grant money, and the projects, including this one, have ranged from the use of virtual reality and virology education, the integration of sustainable development goals in higher education curricula, the use of maker spaces to support creative inquiry-based connection making, and right through to teaching environmental law for policy, innovation, and impact. So a wide range of topics, but all really important in terms of driving forward innovation in this space and giving us chance to be more creative and shore up maybe spaces that those gaps were evident. This funding scheme is designed to enable the development of a strong foundation for future enhancement of teaching and learning within the institution and aligning it with local priorities. At the time of its submission in 2019, there was no nationally recognised pedagogical protocol related to artistic doctorates within Ireland, as Jules has mentioned. And this application represented a unique opportunity for UCC and indeed Ireland to lead on the development here. The Visioning the Future project very much aligns with our own ambitious academic strategy in UCC, which is to foster a connected university with enhanced synergies between teaching and research. Indeed, the institutional learning possible from this project is highly important to ensure our systems can modify to meet and encourage these exciting new opportunities in doctoral education. We are then embodying the idea of the university as a learning organisation. As Director of the Centre for the Integration of Research, Teaching and Learning, I'm very excited about the potential to connect the learning from this initiative with other programmes, such as our digital badge that we run with the Dean of Graduate Studies on postgraduate research supervision. So the more that we can uncover these emerging forms and practices to shore up our own understanding of what's possible in doctoral education and to develop on in this space as well. And I would invite you to connect with us and share those insights. Our centre runs a suite of professional development activities, from credit-bearing programmes to national conferences, digital badges, on a range of learning enhancement topics. And we also partner with staff on a range of national and international research projects seeking to explore and implement innovative ideas and practices relating to teaching, learning and assessment for all our students. So this project is very close to what we're interested in, and very much will be keeping an eye as to the development of this as well. And I was very taken by the bubbles. They reminded me that these bubbles are a way of collecting up and the bubbling up of the various ideas and insights that indeed have shaped the development of this resource. They also speak to hopefully the effervescence amongst those that have worked so hard in shaping this resource, in seeing the culmination of that work. My congratulations to you, Jules, and to your team. I'm excited for the opportunity for this enhancement initiative to create meaningful change in UCC nationally and wherever those bubbles may travel to. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That's wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate that context of the national funding programme. So thank you. I'm going to pass over now to Professor Helen Phelan. Helen is another great ally and friend of the project. She is Professor of Arts Practice in the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance at the University of Limerick and Chair of IMBAS, the Irish Advocacy Organisation for Artistic Research. Helen's book, Singing the Right to Belong, Music, Ritual and the New Irish, was published by Oxford University Press in 2017, and she's been greatly involved in this and a great supporter of the project. Helen, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Jules. It's really wonderful to be with you all here today. I just came from training this morning with an organization called Musicians Without Borders. And you know, one of the words that they kept using throughout the training was the multicultural, as in a singular, like a new kind of cultural community called the multicultural. And it struck me when I was listening to Jules and Vida and Catherine speaking there that we are a multicultural, aren't we? We're a new multicultural because we're coming from so many different performance backgrounds, so many different doors into this area of arts practice research. And yet we are building a shared culture. And I think today's event is a very important landmark in the building of that culture. As Jules said, I chair an organization called IMBAS. And IMBAS started a few years ago when a number of colleagues right across Ireland and right across a number of different performing arts backgrounds, music and dance and theatre, and across a whole number of academic and artistic institutions came together from those different cultural perspectives, but I suppose with one core shared experience. All of us found ourselves in this world of arts practice research, many of us very much on our own, finding ourselves in positions where we were leading programs, developing programs, sometimes creating policy on the hoof as those programs were emerging. And I think that quite organically, our network began out of a desire to do what's happening today, to build a community and to find a place where we could learn from each other. And in forming IMBAS, and as Catherine was talking about the bubbles, of course, I had to think about the origins of the word IMBAS, which of course is the little bubbles of wisdom that come out of the hazelnuts of wisdom in the mythology of the salmon of wisdom and of the river Shannon. And those little bubbles, which were called IMBAS, are bubbles, of course, of creative, visionary wisdom. So what a gorgeous metaphor to be bringing us through these resources today. But in the creation of IMBAS and the articulation of our vision, three core ideas, I suppose, have guided our development. The first, as I mentioned, is this sense of building community, building a multicultural. The second was a space of sharing resources, sharing our ideas, sharing our expertise. And the third was, in a way, using that shared space and those relationships to help contribute to national policy. And I'm really delighted and privileged to have been asked to speak today, because I think the work of visioning had very much answers to the second of those goals, which is this creating of shared resources, resources that are openly and generously available to all of us in this multicultural. Jules, of course, is one of the founding members of IMBAS, and I think much of what we've heard about visioning the future resonates with and aligns with those goals of IMBAS, and the work that Jules and Inish and the team have done over the last 12 months in doing this, I think it's a foundational development in what's happening nationally, in the availability of these resources. But it also, of course, because these resources are now available in this virtual space, it links us globally as well to the kinds of the work that Vida was talking about, and that beautiful phrase that Vida used, that all of us in the work that we're doing, what we wish to do is in our doing and our reflexivity to plumb the depths of what it means to be human and how it is that expressively we engage in that. So on behalf of IMBUS, of my colleagues in IMBUS, and indeed of all of those who are with us today, who are members of IMBUS, it is my great delight and privilege to offer my congratulations to Jules, to Inish, to all the team of Visioning, and I look forward to using these wonderful resources.
Thank you, Helen. I very much appreciate your kind words, and it's great to have that context of IMBAS in the picture here. Okay, thank you. So without further ado, and with all this talk of bubbles, what we'd like to do now is actually move on to actually showing you some of our resource and what we've made. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague Inish Bento-Coelho, who is the postdoctoral researcher on this project. And before I do that, I just wanted to say a couple of words about young researchers like Inish and like Patrick Egan, who you'll be meeting after that. And just to say that it's an extraordinary privilege to work with these young people who come through their doctorates and begin their research careers in a really precarious context. And it's so often the case that the incredible labor that they do is the kind of living heart of these research processes, even as much as I oversee it. So much of the work is done by these young researchers. So I really genuinely want to thank Inish in particular for all of her incredible vision and ideas and willingness to go on with the fine detail and come up with ideas and take initiative and listen and all of those things. She is an extraordinary young woman, and it's been a complete pleasure to work with her. So Dr. Inish Bento-Coelho is an artist scholar and the postdoctoral researcher for this project. She completed a practice-based PhD at the Glasgow School of Art in 2019, supported by the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology. Before joining Visioning the Future, she taught at the University of Glasgow, the Glasgow School of Art, and Central St. Martin's in London, amongst others. And her interests lie in the choreographic within installation art, space awareness and performativity, artistic research studies and doctoral pedagogies. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Inish.
Thank you, Jules. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Jules, for the warm introduction. It has been a real pleasure working with you and with everyone at UCC over the last year. So I'm going to speak a little bit about how the resources came into being, kind of giving it a behind the scenes kind of a thing. And when we started, we didn't exactly know how it was going to look like, what it was going to be. But throughout the research, there were a set of concerns that kept emerging that we wanted to explore. So as Jules mentioned earlier, the resources are very much informed by the summer seminar series that we ran. There was a lot of questions and areas that emerged that felt relevant to explore further. And also by a series of interviews with staff and students across Ireland, students in their final year or who had just completed, and staff who were involved in PhD coordination and in supervision. And of course, the resources are also informed by current scholarship in artistic research, but we actually wanted, as Vida Mijelo mentioned, we wanted the resources to be grounded in the day-to-day of the artistic doctorate. So drawing upon what is challenging, what is working well, what strategies have been successful, and might we propose some strategies to explore things further, rather than a heavily academic resource. So the process of organizing, it kind of felt a little bit of building a collage. You will see that there are throughout the resource posts from interviews with students and staff, which expand on key points that are made and which shows a little bit of the personal experience of others going through the same process or engaged in artistic doctorate supervision and examination, for example. There are also short excerpts of the seminars, and those are kind of key things that felt really relevant to include as part of the resource. And the process of bringing this together kind of evolved organically in terms of making sense of the different strands that we wanted to explore, making proposals on how different things could be explored, and therefore it became a mixture of pedagogy, policy, reflective exercises, and suggestions for action. So the structure is around this distinct audiences, students, including prospective students, the institution, so thinking about the structures that run the doctorate behind the PhD, and also supervisors and examiners. However, these materials are all incredibly interrelated, and therefore we face this challenge of having an incredibly dense piece of text of 80 pages, and how do we make that digestible, exciting, attractable, easy to manage, and easy to view? And that's where transforming that document into open educational resources, and that's where the bubbles all come in. Because for us, it was really important that it was visually immediately accessible, and that the viewer would come in, or the visitor, and would be able to immediately understand the different sections, the different strands, and would be able to say, oh, I want to explore this, and see, oh, there's all these other things I can come back to when I read them. So in a way, finding strategies to make it exciting, accessible, but also relevant and very quickly understandable. The visitor would quickly understand what's behind all the resources. And one of the distinctive elements of it is that it's open. As long as you give attribution and do not use it for commercial purposes, you're welcome to download, use, adapt, and explore for your own purposes in a way that suits each individual's specific needs. So in putting the resources together, we kept thinking also about something that Michaela Glantz mentioned on her supervision seminar, which was she wasn't giving solutions, but giving suggestions. So this is also what the resource aims to do, kind of laying out the ground for what is happening in terms of artistic doctorates, and giving suggestions or proposals on how to explore different strands and challenges. Thank you. Pass over back.
Thank you, Ines. That's wonderful. Right, now I'm going to pass over to the person who made the website, Dr. Patrick Egan, who we've been working with for the last few weeks. So Dr. Patrick Egan is a digital humanist, ethnomusicologist, and performer of Irish traditional music. He completed his PhD at UCC focused on ethnography and digital visualization related to the Sean O'Riordan collection. In 2019, Patrick was awarded a Fulbright Tech Impact Fellowship to work in the Library of Congress in Washington. So it's been a real pleasure to work with Patrick and to develop ideas for what we wanted with the website. So I'm going to pass over to Patrick now to say a few words.
Thanks, Jules. Hello, and thank you all for having me here. It's great to get the chance to speak for the development of the website and see how things came about. I'm in the Department of Digital Humanities here with music in UCC, and I actually started with a performance PhD here. So it's fascinating to hear the speakers and talk about these resources and to view them as well. So first off, I'd like to ask you to have a look at the homepage, artisticdoctorateresources.com. I'm just going to pop it into the chat area here as well, just so that you can have a look. So I'm just going to go through the actual visualization itself. So generally, in most websites, you get the option to create navigation in a conventional sort of manner, but this website was different to the usual, as Ines just says, it's a number of layers or sections that are interrelated together. So I'd like to direct you to the menu on the top right, and just click on the 3 lines on the top right of the homepage, just on the very top right. These are what they call mega menus in the web design industry, and they're used to deal with the problem of eliminating scrolling through reams of sections on the homepages of websites. And they work well by sorting out some of the problems associated with having to dive down through layers of navigation and for having to rely on short-term memory when navigating different websites. And this is the problem faced by the team on this particular website. It does the job in some ways, but the problem with this is that you can't actually access across sections of the site. And so this is where visualization comes in. The visualization is built on a piece of software called D3JS that's usually created to make sense of large amounts of data. And incidentally, I use this to bring a digital angle to the researching of the Sean O'Riordan collection here in UCC. The software's inventor, Mike Bostock, has created...
I'm going to interrupt you there. Sorry, Patrick. Some people, I think there's too many people trying to get on the site at the same time. Would you be able to screen share and maybe show some of this?
Oh, great. Yeah. Oh, 1 second.
So sorry, everyone. It's a very, very new website, so we're...
Yep. There you go. All good?
Yeah, I can't see it yet. Oh, here it is. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so you can see it was created by this piece of software, D3JS, is created by Mike Bostock, who worked for the New York Times, and many of his visualizations were used to make sense of large amounts of data like the election numbers, and also COVID pandemic across the USA. So I developed one of these for Artistic Resources, and looking on the homepage, either on desktop or mobile, you'll see on the refresh that a bunch of circles, they are being pulled into the center of the page and they collide, and this from this then force, they're sent away from the center, but they're brought back using gravity. So if you just click and drag one of the circles, or if you actually touch it on mobile, you can see that you can move it around and it always comes back into the center area. So I modified this code that you can also click on a link to visit a certain area, but when you come back to the visualization, it remembers where you went to and which pages you've been on across the website. And then this changes the color of the link as you go along. So that's really the background behind the visualization. The thing with this type of software is that it's open source, and so many of the developers that create this also, they comply with FAIR principles, which is allowing other people to access the open source code. And it'll be available on github.com to allow this community of developers to modify that code and to reuse it for their own work later on. So yeah, I was really happy with the work, and I'd like to thank the team for giving me the opportunity to develop this visualization, and I hope it'll be of benefit to people in the future. And I'll pass you over to Jules there right now.
Thank you, Patrick. So apologies about the glitches there. So we hope we will be able to kind of clear that up. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we are going to, Enish and I are going to do a demonstration. And so I am going to, first of all, pass over to Enish. Are you ready?
Yes.
A bit more time? Yeah. Okay. So I'll pass over to Enish to introduce, and we'll show you how it works.
Okay, so right now we are looking at the home page, and you'll see the student section is actually divided in 3 parts. We have getting started, which is mostly all the important information for both prospective students and first-year students. So it's mostly kind of an introduction of what is artistic research, what do I need to know as I start an artistic research PhD. And then another section on the process of doing a PhD in artistic research, which very much has all these different strands: the writing, the creative practice, performing or showing your work, and also how you bring all the different strands together. So that's the process bubbles. And then finally, the last bubble is the PhD experience, which brings together all the different parts of being a doctoral student, whether that is supervision, examination, thinking about your career, building your community, and so on. So I'm just going to briefly show the section on what is artistic research. So Jules, if you can find that bubble and click on it. There we are. So as I was mentioning earlier, the resource does not plan to give define putting artistic research in boxes. It's not at all. It's mostly thinking and helping first year or prospective students or second year students understand what is artistic research and what is behind their practice in artistic research. So you'll see, if you scroll a bit further down, you'll see that couple of propositions for artistic research and what it is are mentioned here, such as being a space which is full of potential for some hidden voices, as Triuna mentioned in one of the Visioning the Future seminars, as being also a space for fundamentally rethink and propose new practices and new ways of thinking, as Polybius proposed. But it's also a space for failure, so understanding that artistic research is also a space to explore and to take artistic work to the realms of certain spaces that are not possible within the professional arts world. And then one of the things that kept coming up through the research was this kind of difficulty or a challenge of understanding what exactly artistic research is and what it means to engage in artistic research from a student point of view. And I'm going to read a short quote from one of the interviews, one of the students, and they said, so we had been actually discussing, I asked as part of the interview for the student to bring a picture, and we had been discussing how the picture related to their doctorate, and the students brought a picture of a plant, a flower. And they said, the way the plant looks with all the stems and parts going off of it, that's what my research process has been like. It sums up my journey today so well because there are so many things going off in different directions. It's really hard to plan where the plant is going to grow next, but it's kind of evolving all the time. So in a way, I think we also need to support students in understanding that the process itself is sometimes non-linear, and that having that space to allow for the exploration, and also thinking and knowing what the end point is going to be in terms of what the expectation mission is going to look like. And then if you scroll down a bit further down, a couple of principles about what is an artistic research PhD also came up throughout the research in terms of thinking of rigor in intellectual and creative practice, thinking of the role of practice, how practice contributes to advancing knowledge, and also how the process is advanced very much by the practice itself at different points of the process. Now, of course, these are a selection of suggestion of principles, and there are many others, but these three felt like really core to the artistic research PhD experience. And then you will see that there are a couple of video excerpts throughout the page, and then further down there are some proposals for action. So the proposals for action are more or less suggestions of exercises in terms of helping the student or the supervisor to reflect on the themes that have been put forward in the page and to think about, okay, how do I apply this in my own practice? I'll pass over to Jules, who's going to show you something next.
Thank you, Ines. So here we're back to the bubbles. So I'm going to show you something else from PhD students so you can see here. So these can kind of move around. So from the PhD students, I'm going to look at PhD experience. So you can see here that all those yellow bubbles light up. So those are all the bubbles in this section. And I am going to look at the bubble building community just to give you a sense of what's there. So again, I won't spend too much time on this, but just it felt like a pertinent PDF page, or because you can download all of these as PDF files to look at, because not only is community so important to PhD students and particularly artistic research PhD students, but this whole project has been about building community, and it's been about building community for those of us who are supervisors, examiners, for those of us who are developing protocol and policy. So the fact that there is often feelings of isolation is very strongly felt sometimes for our PhD artistic research students. So here is some propositions for mitigating against that and developing different kinds of groups. And those could be, for example, very traditional forms of groups, such as a reading group where you read a particular text and you get together and you discuss it. But because these are artistic research PhDs, it also may be specifically focused on artistic practice critique, on sharing examples or snippets of practice and getting people's feedback when these processes are still in process. It could also be collaborative explorations where the process of coming together as a group is not through actually talking, but through making. So that could be through a dance practice, a movement practice, a drawing practice. There are many versions of that. Another version might be a peer support, social space, or a writing group. And at the bottom of this particular resource, we've given connections to other familiar ways of giving feedback or responding to creative work. The critical response process by Liz Lerman and John Borstel, and the creative articulation process by Jane Bacon and Vida Migelo are two of those. And here's the place that you can add to download. So you just press that and then you get a little place at the side. So if you minimize your pictures there, you can see that my screen, I've added that, and then I could proceed to download if I wanted to. Okay, right, so I'll come back again. So and passing back to Ines.
Thank you, Jules. Now we're going to look at one of the suggestions for supervisors. So if you look at the supervisors and examiners, that is divided in two sections. One for examination, focusing on the challenges and how to select an examiner, some resources and some strategy, and one for supervisors. So let's look at, where is it? Reflections on supervision, Jules. Thank you. So throughout the research, there are some questions and ideas that came up in terms of how might we involve the practice a little bit more into the supervisory process. And this page, for example, has some strategies and suggestions that came up throughout the seminar series. There are some suggestions from Vida Mijlo and also from Michaela Glant. And it's kind of like the putting out there some suggestions that then you might take forward and see what makes sense within your specific context. So for example, if we look at this example that we've got on the screen right now, this is a suggestion from Vida in terms of how we might shift the approach within the supervision space from the discourse towards the practice. Let's just wait, it's 2 minutes long, so it's a very short excerpt.
One of the things that certainly, I'll give you an example. I was just running a research intensive, so learning how to run a research intensive online. And one of the things that we did within that was set up groups of 3s. And what the candidates did was I invited them, rather than to present a presentation of their work in sort of using kind of language-based modalities, but was to share a fragment of practice or even their research materials. So that might have been something that they were watching or something they were drawing, whatever it might be. And we made creative responses to each other's work. So rather than getting ourselves constantly caught up within playing the kind of discourse game and sharing work within that kind of more traditional model of critique, but was actually to kind of make creative responses to each other's work and using that as a basis to engage with each other. So simple activities like that, or really rich experiences, and give rise to unknowns. So, and also really value the practice at the centre, rather than feeling like actually the thing that's being valued is only my ability to articulate this thing. So that's kind of a short example of a way to set up different kinds of exchanges within a research training activity that just shifts the emphasis and keeps practice at the centre.
So that is one of the suggestions offered. And if you scroll further down, there are a couple more suggestions, and then the last exercise is thinking about how supervision is also an act of nurturing the researchers of the future. And it's interesting because it goes back to what Vida Mijlo was saying earlier today in her introduction, which is how we are supporting young people, young researchers to take further artistic research in the arts. So this last suggestion for practice is kind of based on some of the research from Biggs and Butler, and they talk about how being a supervisor is also an act of training someone to become a researcher. So therefore, thinking about what kinds of professional attributes, what kinds of abilities should we develop, or should they develop, or would I, as a supervisor, want to bring into this person, into the researchers of the future. And I'll pass over back to Jules.
Thank you. So just lastly, before we open up for questions, I'm just going to show you something from the institution section. So I'm going to look particularly at recommendations, and this is a section which gathers together things that came up repeatedly when we were doing the research. So there are things that were of concern or things that were problematic. And so what we offer here is just a kind of summary of those things. And we offer them here as proposals for things to think about and things for further research. So some of those things are to do with admissions, making sure that our admissions processes fully acknowledge that these artistic research PhDs are going to involve practice. And therefore, what do we need to provide or assure that we can provide for a student if they want to make a film or an installation or a piece of dance or compose a piece of music? Another thing that came up regularly was about orientation and how often it is that PhD students sometimes fall through the gaps of what are often quite comprehensive orientation programs, and often BAs and MAs get those, but sometimes PhD students don't. Clear milestones that really mark clearly for the student where they are in what can feel like a very tumultuous few years, and without a kind of clear sense of where should I be at what point. And the annual review often takes the form of supporting this. Understanding about what artistic research is and making sure that there is that clear understanding, even though that's a fluid term, there is a real body of research and lots of public bodies that are engaged with it. So just making sure that there's a clear understanding between student and supervisors about what that is. And there's other things there that you can look at your leisure. Okay, so I'm going to come back now to the bubbles. And I wanted to finish by just playing, because we designed this with playfulness in mind, and the sense in which that it's also fun to play with, even if you are really exhausted with institutions and supervisors and examiners and being a PhD student, whatever it is, you can just come and play, and you can bring it over here and you can bonk those all over the place, and you can it kind of gives a sense of, oh my goodness, these are all connected, but they're also, like, if you're having a common challenge, you can take that over here and bonk it over here and have kind of some sense of being playful. So we loved that possibility through the collaboration with Patrick of finding a visualization that allowed us to have some sense not only of what the connections were with all of these concerns and aspirations and joys and challenges with doing the artistic research doctorate, but also a sense that playfulness, which is here in the visualization, is such a key part of what we do in artistic research. So I am going to stop sharing. It is 5:02, so I haven't left a huge amount of time, but we have a few moments for some questions. Do we have any?
We do have a couple. So there is a question about terminology and scope, and the question is, do you see the PhD as a distinct from the BMUS? And likewise, are you using artistic research to mean something distinct from practice research? And all these variations.
Okay, well, those are very big questions, but artistic research, we use that term because it's a term that's used quite widely in Europe. It was also, so it's very much, it has a European lineage, and I'm very aware that there's a whole kind of practice as research, or research as practice. There's a whole kind of there's a whole choreography of terms out there. Often those refer specifically to performance as research. And in this research project, we are including film and screen media, so not just performing arts, and that was quite important to us. The DMAs, there's a really interesting debate, and what you should do, whoever asked that question, is have a look at the Paulo de Assis video, which is on our website, Visioning the Future, because he gives a really interesting presentation exactly about that, which is the difference between being an expert in a particular field and, you know, perhaps a violinist who's really exploring or composing for the violin, or doing that, but the difference between that and artistic research, where you would use the sensibility of being a composer to ask a research question, is sometimes not particularly clear, and at other times quite clear, but there is a difference. So I would point you to the Paulo de Assis presentation for that. Yeah.
Yes, the terminology was kind of a key point of choosing what would be the terminology that we wanted to stay with, and artistic research still a broad terminology, and this is why we went with it. There is another question asking, is this only for Irish institutions? And I'll say no, not at all. It was built within the Irish context in mind. So our response is very much to what we found on the Irish context, but of course that experience is shareable across other countries. And finally, there is a question on being at the beginning of thinking of applying for a PhD. Is there something about collaboration with other departments outside of the creative arts department?
We talk about collaboration. It's not something, it's an interesting one because maybe that's something that we should develop in the future, but we don't have a bubble, which is about how you collaborate with other departments. That's often, it is often the case with these kinds of PhDs that people are collaborating outside of the arts as well as within the arts. So we don't. So we should make one.
Yeah, it might come later on.
Yeah, it might become
next
later.
stages.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, so thank you for all your kind messages. And I have to say, you know, it's so wonderful to have you all here. I mean, there's been more than 100 people here today. And it's such a pleasure to be able to kind of share the resource with all of you. And do share the resource out. It is there to be shared and to be played with. So I'm going to just thank a few people now. I'd like to thank Michael Ryan, who is behind the scenes and is our technical support and research assistant for this. And we are very grateful for all the support with what has been quite a complicated hour to present. I'd like to thank Vida Migelo again for her support and for the words today. Also Catherine O'Mahony. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to us today. And it's great to have that kind of national and UCC picture. Helen Phelan from IMBAS again, thank you very much for having that context of the Irish Artistic Research Organisation. Inesh, thank you. Patrick, thank you for those bubbles. They've clearly been a hit. And thank you all. And with that, we'll close. Thank you very much.